Okay, good evening, folks. It is time for Breaking the Chain. And well, we have Jeremy with us. He's lurking in the background tonight. And I will be your host. Tonight, we're going to be talking with Brian Lloyd, who's going to tell us all about stalls and maneuvering. So Breaking the Chain is normally presented by Jeremy Walters. And tonight, you get to listen to me be your host. I am a private pilot, aircraft owner, and I work in the software industry. Tonight, we're joined by Brian Lloyd, who's a return guest to this program. And Brian, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks, Eric. Hi, I'm Brian, and I'm a CFI, CFII. Been flying for, 54 years now. And somehow I've managed to amass over 12,000 hours. So hopefully I've learned something in all that time, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of that stuff with you this evening. So Eric, are you ready? Do you want me to jump in and start?
Yeah, go ahead and share your screen. So during his talk, go ahead and type your questions into the questions tab. And we will both be watching and collecting those up and addressing them at the end. So go ahead, Brian.
I think I've got it. And let's see here. That's my presenter display. There we go. I think this is it. Wait for it. Okay. Well, one of the things that you got to make sure you do is try to keep it simple. So there we go. There it is. There's my whole presentation right there. All you got to do is take a look at those three things. I mean, heck, right there. The first item is the formula for lift. And if you know that, the second item there is Newton's first law, body in constant motion will remain in constant motion unless acted on by an outside force. And the last one there is Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration. It's all you need to know to make your airplane fly and keep you safe. Just keep all of those things in mind, and you will do just fine. Any questions on that?
I've got one. What was the first part?
The first one there, the formula for lift. Oh, okay. Let me amplify that a little bit. Let's see here. And it's not changing. Why is it not changing? There we go. So let's go ahead and dissect the formula for lift here a little bit. So L is lift. It's the force generated by your wing. dV squared is, D is air density, and of course V is how fast you're moving through it. But basically that's calibrated airspeed, or if your airspeed indicator is good, indicated airspeed squared. S is the area of the airfoil. CL is the coefficient of lift, and inside there, buried down inside there, is something that you can change, and that's the angle of attack of the wing. And so what does all that mean? Well, remember, means that lift varies by the square of airspeed. If you go twice as fast, your wing can produce 4 times as much lift. Lift varies approximately linearly with angle of attack. If you double your angle of attack, you're going to double your lift up until you get to critical angle of attack, and then the wing stalls and the lift decreases, and you can't do much more with your wing at that point. If all the forces in the airplane are in balance, the airplane travels in a straight line. This is what we do when we're in a steady state climb. This is what we do when we're in cruise. This is what we do when we're in a stabilized approach. And so we're often looking for that condition. If the forces are not balanced, the airplane accelerates in the direction of the net applied force. And that tells you what's going to happen if gravity is greater than lift, or lift is greater than gravity, or thrust is greater than drag, or drag is greater than thrust. It tells you which way the airplane's going to go. So that's it. That really
Any
is all there
questions?
is to it.
No
Any
more
questions? All right. All right.
Maybe you could expand a little bit.
Sure. Killing sacred cows. Tonight, what I'm really going to get into is the fact that there's a lot of stuff that we've been taught as pilots. And maybe not everything was taught to us correctly. We have learned a lot about flying over the last 120 years or so. And frankly, for the last 70 years, we really truly have understood how airplanes work, really and truly down to the smallest detail. If you don't believe me, go get a copy of Wolfgang Langewisch's book, Stick and Rudder, which was produced in, I think it was 1945. And it really tells you how airplanes fly, how to fly them, how not to kill yourself, and so forth. But if that's true, why do we still have pilots killing themselves? And I think that really comes from this. When we learn to fly, we're presented with an expert. That expert is a CFI. And we don't know anything, so we believe what they tell us. But then if we look back down the thread, we realize that when our CFI was a neophyte and met for the first time her CFI, the same thing happened. And our CFI trusted her CFI to tell the truth. And on and on and all the way back to Wilbur and Orville. But the question is, are the things that we were taught really the truth? Are they really correct? And believe it or not, what you don't know can hurt you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw some questions out here. And I want everybody to take a look at these questions and think about the answers. Write them down for yourself so that you can, if maybe you didn't get the right answer, you can be honest with yourself on that. So here are the questions. Stall speed increases with bank angle, true or false? Keep the ball in the center during a stall to prevent a spin. Is that true or false? Aircraft attitude is important to prevent a stall. Okay. How about what aircraft parameter is controlled by the elevator? When you move the stick or yoke forward or backward, what are you actually changing in the airplane? You want to make the airplane turn. What is the primary control that controls a turn? And last one here is what airspeed produces the tightest turn? So has everybody come up with answers to their questions there? All right, let's jump into it. Stall speed increases with bank angle. That's false. Stall speed has nothing to do with bank angle. Ever watched an aerobatic pilot go out, do a roll? Did the airplane stall? Did it fall out of the sky? We watched that airplane roll through 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, 360 degrees of roll, and nothing happened. The reason is stall speed does not increase with bank angle. Stall speed increases with G loading. And so G's are the factor by which lift is multiplied. For instance, if you're pulling 2 G's in your airplane, you're asking the wing to produce 2 times the lift that it was when you were in straight and level flight. Remember, I had started out with that lift formula, and I said something about calibrated airspeed, and lift varies by the square of calibrated airspeed. So if we look at the lift formula, and we know that if we're pulling 2 G's, then our stall speed increases by the square root of 2. So if our stall speed started out at, say, 60 knots, at 2 G's, our stall speed has become about 84 knots. So we have this bias. As human beings, we evolved on flat surfaces. We tend to think in 2 dimensions. So when people talk about this, they talk about doing a turn, we all think about level turns. And so if we have this very specific case where we put the airplane into a 60-degree bank steep turn, we keep the airspeed the same, we don't allow the airplane to climb or descend, in order to maintain that turn, we have to increase the G loading to 2 Gs. And so what we then tell our students is, yeah, when we get into a 60-degree bank turn, you're going to need your stall speed's going to increase by the square root of 2 or 1.41. But that's not really what the airplane is doing. It's just that in that special case, we have to pull 2 Gs in order to make that turn. And therefore it is those 2 Gs that increase the stall speed. Like I said, we come with biases. One of those biases, what is a turn? Most people, you ask them, what's a turn? And they're going to tell you it's a change in heading because we're thinking in 2 dimensions. If you ask an aerobatic pilot or an air combat pilot, you're going to get a different answer. And the reason you're going to get a different answer is these people are used to maneuvering in 3 dimensions and not 2 dimensions. Ask an aerobatic pilot, and they're going to say a turn is a loop laid on its side. Or, you know, the other way of looking at it, a loop is just a turn. It's just a turn in the vertical plane. And Isaac Newton, if he flew, he'd say when an airplane is no longer flying in a straight line at constant speed, it is turning. And that's the key here, getting back to Newton's laws. Any deviation from straight, unaccelerated flight is a turn. It does not matter in which direction we are making the airplane change. It can be a vertical turn. It can be a horizontal turn. It can be an invert. Anytime we're moving that airplane. So a level turn in the horizontal plane is a special case. It's a very special case, but because of our human bias for 2 dimensions, we think of that as the definition of a turn. So let's go on. And the next question was, keep the ball in the center during stall, prevent a spin. The answer to that is false. Because here's the thing, once the wing stalls, the ailerons don't work right anymore. The ailerons are your enemy. You cannot keep the ball in the center once the wing is stalled. Ailerons work by varying the angle of attack of the wing. And think about it for just a moment. Imagine that we're slowing the airplane down to stall, and we're right on the edge of stall. The wing is right on the edge of stall. And let's imagine that the left wing drops and we then roll in right aileron. And what happens? Well, the left aileron goes down and the right aileron goes up. The left aileron, by deflecting downward, is increasing the angle of attack of the left wing. The right aileron going upward is decreasing the angle of attack of the right wing. But imagine we're right on the edge of a stall. If we increase the angle of attack of the wing anymore, what's it going to do? It's going to stall. If we decrease the angle of attack, what are we going to do? We're going to move that airfoil, in this case, the right wing, farther away from stall. So if we're right at stall, if we really and truly have stalled the wing, and we try to keep the wings level with aileron, the ailerons are going to act backwards. And let me tell you, for those of us who are pilots who've been flying for a long time, who just unconsciously move the aileron to correct roll, is going to get a really rude awakening when this occurs. So if the ailerons are still working during your stall, then the wing is not stalled. Most of us, when we've done stalls in airplanes, we found that we get the airplane to slow down at the required 1 knot per second. And we start to get the buffet. We think the wing is stalled, but only part of the wing is stalled. Airplane designers go to great lengths to make sure that the portion of the wing where the ailerons are stall last. But the problem, and they do that through a couple of different things. They do it with stall strips. They do it with washout, where they put twist in the wing so that The outer portion of the wing flies at a lower angle of attack than the inner portion of the wing. But these are things that are put there to fool pilots into thinking that their ailerons still work. We want the ailerons to still work if possible, because the natural response of the pilot to roll is to counter that roll with the ailerons. But if you really and truly have stalled the airplane, your ailerons are not going to work right. So what you have to do at that point is neutralize the aileron. It's not your friend anymore, and maintain directional control with the rudder. You're not going to remember to do that if the wing is truly stalled and starting to fall off on a wing, and you're not going to think, well, just a second. I learned from Brian that if the wing's truly stalled, the ailerons are going to work backwards. So I'm going to use the ailerons backwards, or I'm going to neutralize. You're not going to remember that. So the only way you can really do it is to go out and practice and see what happens. So what you want to do is go out and practice your stalls, and then practice maintaining directional control with the rudder. If you think the wing is stalled, you want to maintain directional control using the rudder. A really good exercise for this is a maneuver called the falling leaf. And there you go and you stall the airplane, you hold the stick or the yoke all the way back, and you use your feet, use the rudder to keep the wings more or less level. The airplane will fall off on one wing or the other. And as it does, you apply opposite rudder to bring that wing back up. And what will happen is the airplane will just sort of rock back and forth like a leaf falling from a tree, which is why it's called the falling leaf. The reason we want to practice that is I know we talk a lot about spins. And two things are required for a spin: stall and rotation about the yaw axis. If we maintain directional control with the rudder, the airplane can never spin. So therefore, getting back to keeping the ball in the center during a stall to prevent a spin, it's not important. Where the ball is completely unimportant. What is important is maintaining directional control regardless of where the ball is. All right. Moving on. Next question. Aircraft attitude is important to prevent a stall. Well, this gets back to our two-dimensional bias. We tend to think in terms of if the nose is above the horizon, we're in danger of a stall. If the nose is below the horizon, we're safe from a stall. And that's really not true. The only thing that determines whether or not the wing is stalled is angle of attack. In other words, the angle the wing makes to the relative wind coming in. If we think or we know the aircraft is stalled, we want to unload. Unload means push forward on the stick or push forward on the yoke, reduce that angle of attack. If the wing is stalled, we don't have control of the airplane. If the wing is unstalled, we have control of the airplane. One of the ways I demonstrate this when I'm with a CFI candidate and we're going out and doing spin training is I take them up my aerobatic airplane and I show them a hammerhead turn. A hammerhead turn is where you pull the airplane vertical, allow the airplane at that point when it's vertical, I reduce the angle of attack to 0. The wing is now flying 0 angle of attack. It can't stall. They watch the airspeed decay all the way to 0. The stall warning never comes on. The airplane decelerates to almost 0 airspeed. And then I kick in the rudder and the rudder still works. I use a little aileron to keep it from rolling and the ailerons still work. So here we are well below, we're traveling vertically upward. We're well below, quote, stall speed, and the airplane's still flying and under control. Well, as soon as I kick the airplane over and I have the nose straight down, but we're still going pretty slowly, I pull the stick all the way back. This increases the angle of attack and causes the wing to stall. Now they're looking at the ground, practically straight down at the ground, and yet the airplane is stalled. The stall warning is on, the stall buffet is happening. The airplane tends to snatch left and right because it's wanting to enter a spin, and I'm maintaining directional control with the rudder. So that lets you see the fact that you can have the airplane vertical and not stalled, and vertical straight down and stalled. So next one, What aircraft parameter is controlled by the elevator? And the answer to that is angle of attack. I know a lot of people probably wrote down pitch, but here's the interesting thing. When you deflect the elevator, imagine deflecting the elevator up, the elevator and there's a force now causing the elevator and horizontal stabilizer to move downward. But basically the airplane pivots around its center of gravity. And very quickly, the elevator and horizontal stabilizer come back into equilibrium with the relative wind, which means there's no more rotation. It stops. That may only be a degree or two. But imagine the fact that the elevator is connected to the fuselage is connected to the wing, and that change in relative wind caused by the elevator and horizontal stabilizer changes the angle of attack of the wing. The pitch change occurs as a result of the change in the lift of the wing. Going back to that lift formula, we've increased the angle of attack or decreased the angle of attack. We've changed the amount of lift in the wing, and it's the lift in the wing acting on the airplane that causes the change in pitch, not the elevator itself. So the interesting thing here is because of this equilibrium that happens, the fore-aft position of the stick or yoke is a direct indication of the angle of attack of the wing. You can go out and do this. Go out in your airplane, and let's say you're flying a Cessna 172. You've got a yoke, and you've got the shaft of the yoke that goes into the instrument panel. Take a grease pencil or a Sharpie or something, and go out and stall your airplane. Take it up right up to the edge, get it right to the buffet, and you're holding the yoke and right on the edge of stall. Put a mark on the shaft of the yoke where it enters the instrument panel. Now go back, and now let's do an accelerated stall. Put the airplane into a 60-degree bank steep turn, and do it fairly slowly. Like if your airplane stalls at 60 knots, do this at about 80 knots, which, remember, our lift changes with the square of airspeed. So your airplane should stall at about 2 Gs, which we can get in a level 60-degree bank turn. So we put the airplane level 60-degree bank turn. We're pulling on the yoke. We get right to that buffet. If you look down, you're going to find that mark on the shaft of the yoke is going to be right at the edge of the panel, showing you that the airplane stalled at the same angle of attack, even though you were flying at a greater airspeed and at a higher G loading. So, continuing on. What is the primary flight control in a turn? And the answer for this is the elevator. The rudder corrects for adverse yaw. That's really its function. The aileron changes the direction of the lift vector. In other words, here's my wing, here's my I don't know if you got video of me also while I'm showing this, but anyway, you can imagine the lift vector coming out the top of the wing. And all we're using the aileron for is to point the lift vector in the direction we want the airplane to accelerate. So if I want to make a turn to the left, I need to somehow point that lift vector to the left. So I use the aileron, I roll the airplane an appropriate amount, and then I pull on the elevator to increase the angle of attack. The wing produces more lift, the airplane accelerates in that direction, and that's how our wing turns, or how our airplane turns. All right. Let's see here. Well, go try it. Go try it. Go out. Try to do it. I find the thing that I use to demonstrate this is what's called an aerobatic turn. Aerobatic competition pilots are required to make very sharp maneuvers. And so what they do is to reverse direction is they'll do an aerobatic turn. And an aerobatic turn is just a very sharp 60-degree bank steep turn. They will roll the airplane about its axis without changing its direction at all using the aileron. As soon as they hit 60 degrees of bank, they immediately pull on the stick, to 2 Gs, and the airplane instantaneously enters a 60-degree bank steep turn. As soon as they hit the desired heading, the stick goes forward and they roll out. So it's a very sharp 3-part turn. And that very clearly shows the separation of turning using the aileron and using the elevator. But yeah, go out and do it for yourself. Do a steep turn and don't pull on the yoke. The airplane's not going to do much of a turn. As soon as you load it up, as soon as you pull on the yoke, the turn happens. All right. What airspeed produces the smallest radius turn? I know when I talk to most people, most pilots, they say, oh, it's something really, really slow. You know, we find we can do our tightest turn in slow flight. I go, well, let's take that to its limit, to its edge. Let's put the airplane right at stall speed. We're in the Buffet. We're right at stall speed. We can't get, looking at that lift, we are producing absolute maximum lift that the airplane will produce at the current airspeed that it's flying. Well, if we attempt to make a turn, we have to increase the lift. Any attempt to increase the lift by increasing the angle of attack is going to cause the airplane to stall. So in that case, we can't, yes, the question, I just got a question, is that true even if you're in a descent, not turning without pulling back and thinking of the emergency descent? Yes, it is true because the wing is producing lift. And you are going, if you don't pull back at all, the airplane is going to continue accelerating. So you need to do something to bleed off that energy. But anyway, let's get back to VA here. Distance travel. So if you can't turn at all if you're right at stall speed. We know that the speed has to be higher. Distance traveled increases with speed. So our circle is getting bigger as our airspeed increases. But our lift force that allows us to tighten the turn increases by the square of airspeed. So the faster I go, the tighter I can turn. I can pull harder. I can pull the airplane into a tighter turn by the square of the airspeed. However, when I get to VA, I can't pull any harder because any attempt to pull harder to tighten up that turn will exceed the aircraft's maximum load factor. So our radius of turn will get smaller and smaller as we approach VA. And then once we hit VA, we're now limited by our G loading. We can't pull any harder. If we go faster, our circle will get bigger again. So the military named it a good name. They called it cornering speed. That's why I like it better than maneuvering speed. On the other hand, think about it this way. If you need to maneuver your airplane and you need maximum performance from your airplane to maneuver, you really must get it up to maneuvering speed. You must get it up to VA. Oh, and one more thing. You got to pull all the way to critical angle of attack, because that's where, going back to our formula of lift, critical angle of attack, or just short of critical angle of attack, is the point at which our airfoil, our wing, is producing the maximum amount of lift. Now, if we're going slowly, we can't get a lot of extra lift. If we're going faster, we can get a lot more extra lift. So as we accelerate towards towards VA from a lower speed, we're going to hit our angle of attack limit before we hit our G limit. As we go faster, we can pull more G. As we pull more G, we can tighten our turn. Once we pass VA, we can't do that anymore. Our turn's going to get bigger. So now we have new ideas. How do we apply that? Well, one of the ways we apply that is to think about the kinds of problems that we face. Loss of control accidents are not getting any better. If we look at the trends for accidents in aviation, accident rates have been steadily decreasing. Accident rates associated with other things, mechanical issues, weather, so forth. We've seen a general downward trend. However, loss of control in flight accidents have not really decreased. And I believe it's because of the things that I talked about earlier, which is people just don't fully understand how their airplanes fly because they were taught things that weren't correct. So how do we avoid our loss of control in flight? A couple of things here. I know a lot of people think of the base to final base to final turn stall spin as being the really dangerous thing. However, only 18% of base to final landing approach, only 18% of lock-eye fatalities occur in that environment. Stall spin is much more likely, almost twice as likely to occur on takeoff. And then the rest, a whole bunch, is maneuvering flight at low altitude, which means, in the pattern. So how do we reduce loss of control in flight? And the way we do that is by developing new behaviors. We have to change our natural responses. It can be especially difficult. If we're nose low and the wing is stalled, our natural reaction is to pull back. And all that's going to do is to keep the wing stalled, and things are not going to go well. Like I said, if the wing is stalling, you want to unload, you want to push. And that's really hard to do if all you're looking at is dirt. Second thing, stop moving the ailerons. If you think that wing is stalled, your ailerons aren't going to help you. In spite of the fact that the airplane may be rolling, you have to resist the temptation to use that aileron to correct that undesired and uncommanded roll. Control the direction with the rudder. So once the wing's stalled, you got to get it unstalled, maintain directional control, unstall it, unload, directional control, use that rudder. Once the airplane's flying again and you've gotten some speed, then you can effectively maneuver the airplane back to level flight. How many people out there, how many people actually practice this stuff? When was the last time you went out and did stalls? When was the last time you did accelerated stalls? When was the last time you did something like a falling leaf? If you don't do it and you don't practice it, you won't do it right when you really need it. So get out there and practice this stuff. Get with a CFI who's done this stuff before and go out and practice it. See what it's like. Go take some aerobatic lessons. Tell you what, that will improve your flying a whole bunch. Oops, I accidentally went. There we go. Once we've got the airplane installed and we need to turn, well, first thing, airspeed is your friend. We want to get up to VA. Let me tell you, it can be really hard. Let's say you've upset your airplane and you are seriously nose down. You're looking forward and all you're seeing is brown. It can be really, really hard to push and shove in the throttle. Next, as your airplane is accelerating, you have to be prepared to pull right up to critical angle of attack or max G load, whichever comes first. And most of us probably have never pulled on that yoke to try to create 3.8 Gs in a standard category airplane. But here's the thing: if you don't hear the stall warning, you're not pulling hard enough. If you're on the slow side. And of course, conversely, but if the airplane then stalls, then you're pulling too hard. And the only way you're going to get to the point where you find that spot in between is to go out and practice. And my recommendation for practicing this is to go out and do accelerated stalls. I like to do accelerated stalls to the left in a standard aircraft with an engine that rotates clockwise, or a right turning engine. P factor and torque make the airplane want to roll to the left. So I like accelerated stalls in a left turn as a way to simulate an upset. As soon as the airplane stalls and starts to rotate and starts to roll to the left, neutralize the aileron, push, maintain directional control with the rudder. When the airplane has some more airspeed, then you can roll, wings level, and then pull to get the nose back up to the horizon. Upset prevention and recovery training. It's a lifesaver. And in fact, UPRT is actually the acronym that we use to remember what it is that we have to do. Unload, reduce the load factor on the airplane, get the wing flying again. Power. If you're below VA, you need more power. If you're above VA, you probably need less power. Once the airplane is flying, roll. Don't try to pull and roll, just roll. Get the wings back parallel somehow to the horizon. Then we transition to level with a hard pull. It's nice to talk about this on a PowerPoint. It's a whole lot nicer to go out and do it in an airplane. Okay, so it's time for this old pilot to tell stories. I think I'm going to go back to, let's see here. Where's my, turn off my screen sharing and go back to my video here. Eric, my video on there?
It is.
Okay, so I'm going to tell some stories about some of these things because it certainly makes a whole lot more sense and means a whole lot more when you've got a real honest to guy story with it. One of the things occurred to me about 5 years ago when I was flying around the world. And I was being vectored for an ILS in Yangon in Myanmar. I was a little more than halfway around the world. And I'm looking at this big towering cumulus cloud and thinking, do I want to fly into that? But I look down and my storm scope says no electrical activity. Well, maybe this isn't a thunderstorm. So I said, Yangon approach, 916 Bravo Lima. Are you showing any weather between, along my path? He said, nope, nothing there. Okay, it'll be a little bumpy, but not too bad. So I continued on into this somewhat ugly black cloud, which actually turned out to be an immature thunderstorm. And the immature thunderstorm turned into a mature thunderstorm about 10 or 15 seconds after I entered the cloud. And I happened to fly right into that first initial wind shear, which rolled my airplane 135 degrees and left me 30 degrees nose down. The interesting thing,
visual aid.
Yeah. Like this. This is where I was. And the interesting thing was no startle response. I've been practicing UPRT and teaching UPRT for many years. And the interesting thing was, I was like half my brain's going, oh, look, the other half of my brain is doing this thing with my hands and my feet and the throttle. And I unloaded and I rolled the airplane back upright. I was about 30, 40 degrees nose down at this point. I started my max performance turn to get the nose back to level. And now I'm about 90 degrees to my original flight path. And about 10, 15 seconds later, I popped out of the cell. And while it was happening, my brain's going, wow, this is really cool. This UPRT stuff really works. That's a true story. So it's useful. I'm not sure that everyone would have had that same response. Now, some different kinds of things. I do a lot of Mooney training. And so I often have Mooney pilots come to me for transition training. And not so long ago, I had a gentleman contact me for his insurance company required 5 hours of dual instruction to insure him in his very first GA airplane, which was an F model Mooney. And this guy he's an airline pilot. He was military trained, flew transport category aircraft in the Air Force, was a captain, was now a captain in a major airline. And he had just completed upset training in the simulator. And so, I figured this guy's good to go. So we are climbing out, we take off, we're climbing out. I go, hey, we're climbing out, we're fairly low airspeed. I said, why don't we just go right into a power on departure stall so you can see how the airplane works. He said, okay. And he pulled the nose up about 30, 35 degrees. So you can imagine the airspeed indicators going just like this. And the time between stall warning and stall buffet was probably not measurable. I mean, we blew through, it was stall warning and stall buffet. Well, what he succeeded in doing was something I'd never seen happen in a Mooney before. He succeeded in completely stalling the wing. No part of the wing was flying. The engine was still producing full power and at a really kind of high angle of attack. So P factor was big and the torque was on there. What do you think the airplane did? It rolled to the left with a vengeance. What do you think he did? He rolled in full right aileron. I've never seen a Mooney roll that fast before. I had enough time to turn and look at him, and he was just like this. Yoke pulled back all the way in the right, mouth open, eyes big. Just like that. No response. About this time, we're passing through 90 degrees of bank. I said, I got it. Of course, first thing I did was shove the yoke forward, roll the aileron, yoke, the ailerons level, and stomped on the right rudder. Everything stopped. Airplane nose down, picked up some speed, roll wings level, pull back to level. His reactions were absolutely natural. I think most pilots would have that reaction, which is why you have to train yourself to have a new set of reactions. We have to react to that stall with a push, ailerons level, and rudder to control, to provide directional control. Get the airplane accelerating. Maybe even if you don't already have full power, you want to get power in there because we want to be accelerating towards VA, because we may end up seriously nose down. And we now want the smallest turn possible. If this happens at low altitude, we want the smallest turn possible to get that airplane level again. So one more story, again, Mooney pilot. But this Mooney pilot had asked me to give him some UPRT training in addition to his Mooney transition training. And so I brought my Cap 10B and we were out and we were doing the accelerated stall. And I had done one and demonstrated, and he started to do it. But what he did was he let the nose get down. And then he started to pull. Well, the airplane began to go faster and faster. And so he pulled harder and harder. And what he had done is, instead of getting into an accelerated stall, he had put the airplane into a real honest to gosh graveyard spiral. And we were already up to 4.5 Gs, and he's still pulling harder. And I said, recover. And I said, and I talked him through it, push. As soon as he pushed, the G's came off the airplane. So there was our unload. Roll. We were at probably about 80 degrees of bank. Roll, get the wings level. We're now still pretty nose down. And then transition to level with a 4G pull back to level. We're all good. And I said, well, that was really good. We were going to do an accelerated stall, and we actually have to do a real honest to gosh upset recovery for real, because you got the airplane into a graveyard spiral. So it's interesting that the UPRT process works whether you're at the slow end of the envelope, stalled, or at the fast end of the envelope, graveyard spiral. You look at it, We do exactly the same thing. Unload to protect. In the first case, we unload to reduce the angle of attack and break the stall. In the fast case, we unload so we don't pull the wings off the airplane. And with the airframe unloaded, we can now safely roll without damaging the airplane. One of the things that breaks airplanes is pulling and rolling at the same time. Even though the book says you can pull 3.8 Gs, if you're pulling 3.8 Gs and you try to roll your airplane, one of your wings, the wing that you're asking to produce more lift, that wing is under greater load than the 3.8 Gs that your G meter reads in your instrument panel, if you have a G meter in your instrument panel. So it is potentially possible to break your airplane, even though you keep it within the G rating of the airframe, if you are pulling and rolling at the same time. So we want to separate those. So anyway, that pretty much covers the things that I wanted to talk about. And hopefully people have questions, and I will be happy to answer. And by the way, I can answer any question. A lot of them for a lot of them, the answer is I don't know, but I can answer any question. So do we have any questions, Eric? Got anybody out there who's
I'll let folks start typing over there. I've got some that I've built up just listening here.
okay?
So in a normal GA airplanes, you talked about maneuvering speed or cornering speed, VA. In a level turn, is there a common bank angle that allows you to hold to the maximum angle of attack? In other words, to achieve that tightest turn?
Well, bank angle, you achieve
talking-
that tight.
I-
You
I
achieve,
set it up
you
as
achieve
level-
that tight. Yeah, you achieve that tightest turn simply by pulling to 3.8 Gs. Now, it depends on where your lift vector is pointed. You know, if my lift vector is pointed like this, I'm going to do a tight turn, and we call that a loop.
Mm-hmm.
If my lift vector is pointed like this, I'm going to go this way. If I pull real hard and my lift vector is pointed like this, I'm going to go that way. Now, we have, you know, as pilots, we do this horizontal turn thing. And so that's where the certain bank angles produce certain G loads, because what we're doing is we're balancing the lift of the wing, the lift vector of the wing, and the force of gravity, so that it yields a flight path that is horizontal, although turning. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
See, here's the thing. You want to turn. If you pull too hard, you're going to, let's say you're trying to do a 60-degree bank, level steep turn. What's going to happen is if you pull a little too hard, the airplane's going to start doing an oblique climbing turn. If you don't pull hard enough, the airplane will do an oblique descending turn. If you unload completely, the airplane will stop turning in the direction of the lift vector, because there's no lift vector, and it will begin to accelerate following the gravity vector. The pull of gravity will start affecting it. So I think that kind of I see the anonymous attendee says, what is the meaning of life? Actually, I was going to say, I don't know, but the meaning of life is airplanes and flying. That is the meaning of life. Everything else was created so that we could have airplanes, and we could
42 airplanes.
However many you need. I'm up to 5 right now, and you know, they all do something different. Well, no, 2 of them do the same thing, but mostly they do something different. So what else we got?
The Chandelle is taught during the commercial rating as a maximum, like an escape maneuver. You know, get out of box canyon, 180-degree turn, get away from the ground. Is that the most efficient way to make that maneuver, or is it more of a balance between not too aggressive but good enough?
Well, I mean, there are a couple of different things. mean, it depends on how big your box canyon is, how much room you've got, and how much, how much smash you've got going in. I mean, I'd probably do an Immelman, pull it up into half a loop and roll out on the top. That way I don't need any. I mean, I can do that in a very narrow box canyon.
Yeah.
The second thing is don't fly up a box canyon. Never fly up a canyon. You can fly down a canyon, but you don't fly up a canyon. I know I was taught the same thing. Yes, the chandelle is the way you get out of a box canyon. You know, it's a maximum performance climbing turn. I don't know. It doesn't seem that way to me. Obviously, what happens is as we're doing that, we're slowing down. And as we're slowing down, our radius of turn is getting bigger, not smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, you're trying, I suppose if you're in a canyon like this and the walls are getting farther apart, then maybe that might work because your turn's going to be tight initially. You know, you're going to start your turn. It's going to be a vertical turn at the beginning, and it's going to turn into a horizontal turn as you moderate the direction of lift by rolling the wings more level as you complete the turn. So it's really, I don't know, it seems more to me like it's a way to gain altitude and reverse direction, but I'm not sure it's going to get you out of that box canyon the fastest. I'd probably go, let's get a bunch of smash, let's roll it on its side, and let's pull 3.8 Gs and get that, get that smallest radius turn we can, be my response. Or like I said, if I've got enough smash, I'm going to do a vertical turn. I'm going to pull the airplane up over the top. If I can get the airplane beyond vertical, I can unload, let the airplane fall through, start to get some airspeed, and then roll out, go back the way I came. And I might do that even at a Mooney. But let's hope we don't get into that type of situation. Let's see here. In a level turn, the G loading is the arc tangent of the angle. So 3.8 G is 75-degree bank for a level turn. Good. Oh, hey, Dave. Good to see you. Of course, I should have known. Dave Bridgen's a friend of mine. He's a CFI. Great guy. Been flying for a long time and spends his summers for fun flying aircraft in Alaska.
Awesome. I love using trig to answer the question. Thank you.
What else we got?
So you mentioned something early on, sacred cows here. So I'm going to repeat it just as the naive person, but I was told that the stall speed increases with the angle of bank. I bet you I can go on Google right now and find that answer.
Absolutely. My instructor told me that. My instructor's instructor told him that.
It's printed in books.
It's printed in books. And the answer is it's just wrong. Stall speed increases by load factor, by G loading. It has nothing to do with bank angle. So it keeps coming back to the fact that as human beings, we think it's normal to be on flat ground. We walk around on flat ground. We know that it's, as we were evolving and we went up in trees and we fell out of trees, it hurt. So we like to stay on flat level surfaces. So, and we carried that with us. That's kind of indelibly burned into our brains. And so changing our viewpoint from this two-dimensional level attitude, which pervades aviation. You think you're learning to fly. So much emphasis is on making level turns, climbs to altitudes, and maybe maintaining level at that altitude. Literally, we can think of our life as flying in a layer cake. All we do is we change layers and then we fly around in the horizontal plane defined by our new altitude, and we try to stay there. But airplanes really are three-dimensional creatures, and we really need to start thinking in terms of how they behave in a real three-dimensional world.
So do not go out and do low-level maneuvering. I'm going to say that to begin with.
That's a good thing.
Why does it matter for the folks that are being irresponsible doing low-level maneuvering, thinking if I just stay fast enough, then I can zoom and pull?
You can, and we've all gone to air shows and we've watched people who have practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced go and do that. Okay. Yes, you can do that, but it's always nice to leave yourself a little bit of margin when things don't go exactly the way you plan, especially if you haven't practiced. It's amazing how an airplane can surprise you. And, going out, when you first start flying aerobatics, things generally don't go the way you expect them to. It's not at all unusual to fall out of a maneuver and go, oh gosh. And then it's really nice to have, 1,500 feet at least, 2,000, 3,000 feet underneath you to recover. It's just nice to have that cushion.
Brad asked, so Brad, the question you're asking there, could you reach the critical angle of attack at a higher speed? That's exactly the point.
Yes, critical angle of attack and higher speed. Critical angle of attack has nothing to do with speed. It has everything to do with the angle the air is coming into the wing. And we control that with the elevator. As the elevator, we raise that elevator, the elevator and horizontal stabilizer move down and they find a new equilibrium position. They stop moving, but at a new angle. And so the wing is now at a new angle of attack. Its lift increases. What happens with so we can hit that critical angle of attack at any speed. But if we're going faster, the wing will be producing more lift and will therefore produce more acceleration in the direction of the lift vector coming out of the wing, which is kind of, here's my wing, here's my lift vector. If I'm here, it's going to be this way. If I'm here, it's going to be this way, which is why the airplane will follow a circular path doing a loop when you pull on the yoke and hold it there, and you've got enough airspeed. So yeah, we can reach critical angle of attack at any speed. All it changes is when we hit that critical angle of attack, how much lift is the wing going to be producing, which tells us how much acceleration or change in direction can happen.
So there's a question in the chat about the best way to avoid stall spins on final, or the base to final turn. And let me start out by saying that when I was taught to fly, I was told don't bank too sharply as you're turning in the pattern or turning to final. You keep it to standard rate or so, and that's an old wives' tale.
Yes, it's an old wives' tale, and it is the source of the base to final stall spin scenarios that we see. One of the things I like to do with my with CFI candidates on their spin ride, I do a lot on the spin endorsement ride. A lot of, if other people, you go to a spin endorsement, we go up on a 172, instructor puts it in a spin, instructor candidate recovers, there's your endorsement. I like to do other stuff because it's fun. One of the things I like to do is go up and do the dreaded base to final stall spin scenario so that it can actually see it evolve. So here, let me describe it. You're on base and you've got an overshooting wind. The wind is from let's say we're left traffic, we're making left-hand turns. We have a crosswind from the left. So the tendency is for the airplane to overshoot final. So as you're going through, you're already at your 30 degrees of bank that your instructor told you never to exceed in the pattern. And you're seeing that, you're seeing
runway slide away.
Runway slide away. So if I could just get the nose around a little faster, you step on the rudder. Okay. And you do a skidding turn there, but because you're all in a 30-degree bank, the nose goes down like this. Okay. And what do you do when the nose goes down?
Pull it up.
You pull. Well, let's see. Bunch of left rudder, airplane slow, not too far from stall, rudder, pull back on the elevator. Oh, by the way, that's the entry to a snap roll.
Now wait, I'm starting to yaw too. So
you've just asked the airplane to spin. You've said, airplane, please spin for me. An aerobatic pilot's doing that. They're doing a snap roll. They're asking the airplane to do a low speed roll by doing a horizontal spin. You've just commanded the airplane into a snap roll. Problem is, you get about here and the pilot goes and installs it. But now the airplane's sitting like this. And all this down here is brown. And so the pilot, faced with a windscreen full of brown, what do you think they do?
Pull.
Pull the airplane vertically into the ground. And if you've ever watched a video of someone who's done that, that's exactly what they do.
Just straight down.
Yeah. And it's fun to do because we can do it. And after you do it a couple of times and you know exactly what's going to happen and you put the correct control inputs, I mean, as soon as the airplane begins to snap, you want to unload, and you want to unload vigorously and aggressively. And then as soon as the airplane's flying again, you've got the power in, you're rolling, and then you're doing a maximum performance pull. You pull right to the edge of stall. We want to hear, when we're doing that pull out, we want to hear the stall warning horn the entire time, because that stall warning is telling us that we're right on the edge of stall, which means we're right on the edge of maximum lift from our wing. That's going to give us the smallest turn radius, and hopefully that turn radius allows our flight path vector to not intersect the ground.
So I'm going to point out that when you're talking about turn radius, you're not talking level turns now. You're thinking in terms of loops or circles in the sky.
It's circles in the sky. It doesn't matter whether the circle is this way or the circle is this way or the circle is this way or the circle is this way. That's every one of those is a turn. But we need to turn the airplane here. We need to turn from here or maybe here, and we need to get it to here and then to here. So yes, I saw someone say something like, I'm not buying this. It's true.
So I wanted to point out that that Jason Miller with Learn the Finer Points, he just in the last few days or so released a video where he's talking about the very scenario you were talking about, where a student is doing a power on stall, and of course the left wing starts to drop off, and just that the sort of basic, the first thing you learned was the ailerons control the control the wings. Tries to lift the wing, and of course it then rolls over even faster.
Yeah. In fact, sometimes I find sometimes we have to try to do a spin in a 172 or a Cherokee. Cessna 150 spins really nicely, but the 172 and Cherokee, they don't want to go into a spin. They need a little encouragement. And the answer to help the 172 and the Cherokee go into a spin is what I call outspin aileron. If I want it to go to the left, throw in that right aileron. I want to force that inside wing to be more stalled, that outside wing to be less stalled, and that helps the airplane get that yaw going so that it will actually begin to spin.
And so I'll point out that if you just take that nose down and point towards the runway like a base to final turn, it's the exact same control input that is causing that the stall spin.
Yep. Now I saw something pop up there about my airplane requires rudder to turn. Not really. The rudder is there when we're unless we're trying to do something really uncoordinated, like a slow roll in aerobatics or something. The rudder really is there just to provide control or to reduce adverse yaw. It is the lift of the wing that is causing the airplane to turn, to accelerate in the direction we want it to go.
So Brian, can you talk a little more? What are about the scenarios that you use in upset prevention and recovery training? So one of the ones you mentioned, the fast case, where you've got yourself into a graveyard spiral,
right?
And the harder you pull, the tighter it gets, and the faster.
The more the G loading increases, the faster the airplane goes. This is that really dangerous side where you can pull the wings off the airplane, because the lift continues to increase. The faster you go, if you don't do something to decrease the angle of attack, the faster you go, the more lift the wing produces, the tighter the airplane turns because we've increased the lift. And that's just a positive feedback system. And you will eventually get to the point where you pull the wings off the airplane. So you got to unload.
So what other scenarios then do you initiate or set up?
Well, I do the base to final stall spin scenario, because that does a really great job of getting the airplane into an upset condition, usually something fairly close to inverted. And now we have to deal with recovering from that. I also use the accelerated stall to the left. I like to try to get up around 2.5 to 3 Gs if I can, because most of our GA airplanes will roll pretty aggressively to the left when that happens. It's not at all unusual to find the airplane. When I'm doing it in aerobatic airplanes, not at all unusual for the airplane to end up with a 120 to 140 degree bank by the time you have a chance to unload. With our GA airplanes, it's not at all unusual to get to 60, 70 degrees of bank when that happens. And it gives you a pretty good feeling of having to respond with the unload and then roll, get the wings level. At that point, the nose is probably pretty far down, and then pull the nose back up with a fairly aggressive pull that won't damage the airplane. Other things that I like to do, one of the maneuvers that I do with students on almost every flight is what I call a pushover. And this is to address a set of responses to avoid the stall spin, loss of control in flight on takeoff. Twice as many people die from loss of control on takeoff and climb out as do on landing. It's pretty hard. You can imagine you've just done a maximum performance. You're on a short field. You got trees at the end of the field. And so you've done a maximum performance takeoff. You're taking off, you're at VX. So you're pretty slow. You're climbing out to clear those trees and the engine quits. It's really hard to push. And you have to build that in until it's a reflex. So I do this with my students. I get them to put the airplane into a climb, and then I go, oh, look at that, and I pull the mixture. And they have to unload and get the airplane at least to VX and accelerating towards VG, best glide speed. So that's another one. And it's something anyone can do at any time. But again, it reinforces that response to push instead of pull. And it's really hard. That airplane going down, pull response is really strong. Airplane rolling to the left, aileron response, that's really strong. And you have to get to the point where you replace those instinctive behaviors with new behaviors.
So I'm going to ask, you mentioned about stall spin on takeoff being a large part of the loss of control accidents.
Like 28%.
Is that the scenario? Is loss of thrust? And
that's often what happens. The other one that happens is hot and high density altitude takeoff, insufficient performance to keep the airplane, to allow the airplane to climb out of ground effect. What's the natural response as they see the trees coming up? Natural response, once again, is to pull. Can't do it. Can't do it, folks. Airplane won't do it. If the airplane is stalled and out of control, odds are very high you're going to die. If the airplane is under control and you can get your flight path something close to parallel to the surface of the earth, odds are extremely high you're going to survive. Obviously not if you drive into the side of a building, but you know, the idea is if you've got any kind of ground around you, it's like Bob Hoover used to say, if a crash is inevitable, fly the airplane as far into the crash as possible. And that's another way of saying, don't lose control, fly the airplane, maintain control of the airplane. And that may mean push when you don't really want to.
And I assume then that is also if you're coming up at the end of the runway and you're seeing the trees and you're not out of the ground effect, better to start scrubbing speed.
Exactly. Best
on the
thing.
Ground.
You know what? Let's pull the throttle and let's land straight ahead under control. And okay, maybe we are going to go into those trees. Let's try to aim so that we aim between two trees and let the trees slow us down by taking the wings off the airplane. Remember, the airplane is disposable. At that moment, you go, I give this airplane to the insurance company. And then at that point, it's all about saving your skin and the skin of your passengers. I see Stephen David has a really good question. How do we overcome fear of steep turns? I think with most anything, Stephen, it's going out and doing it and working your way up to it. Start by going out and doing small steep turns. You know, roll into a steep turn, pull, turn 20 degrees and roll out again. Next time you do it, turn 30 or 40 degrees and roll out. That way you're not staying in it for a long period of time. Of course, going out and doing some aerobatics so that you see steep turns are really very benign compared to some of the other things you can do. That might work too. But working your way up to it, I think, is a good way to become familiar with the feelings accompanying, the G forces, the fact that the horizon is not horizontal. All of those inputs, your brain's going, this is a bad place to be. I'm an ape. I know if I'm in this tree and I'm going to fall out of this tree and it's going to hurt when I hit the ground. I mean, that's been in our brains for a long time. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that you have that discomfort, but it also makes perfect sense that you can use your conscious mind to work up to it. And through repetition and understanding, you can overcome that fear and be able to be comfortable with it eventually.
So Josh has a question, which I'm gonna add to this one a little bit.
Okay.
I think this is probably this is back to the placard in the 172s, and it's actually a holdover, sort of a vestigial organ from the 172s with the 40-degree flaps. But why does it say avoid, not don't do, but avoid slips with the flaps? Is that part of what you're talking? Is that a danger what you're talking about here with loss of control?
I don't think so. I've gone out and done slips in airplanes with full flaps. I think really what it is, and I read something recently that where that came from was one of the flight test pilots in the early Cessnas, in the early Cessna 172, I think it was, maybe the 182. He went out and did this, and he found that when he did, in some conditions, if he did slips with full flaps, he would
and this
get,
is back with 40 degrees when they had 40
yeah,
degrees.
and he got a vibration in the elevator. Basically, the turbulent airflow over the elevator was causing the elevator to jump in his hands. And he came back and he reported that to the engineers, and they decided, that probably would scare a bunch of people. So we'll just placard against that. But I haven't seen anything that suggests that the Cessna 172 or 182 with full flaps is going to become uncontrollable or lose control in a slip with full flaps. So, but here's the other thing. I didn't flight test that airplane. That's the story I've heard. I have done slips in the Cessna with all flap positions. I've never been real aggressive with them. When you put 40 degrees of flaps down on a old Cessna 150 or 172 or 182, and you're slow, that thing's a brick. A slip is almost superfluous at that point. So if you need to come down that fast, well, what I do, I go up and try it at altitude first. You certainly don't want to find out that you don't like it when you're 50 feet off the ground.
Correct. So I'd read similar things that you had just said. Well, we're getting close to the end here.
I see I've got one that's rolled off the, let's see.
Yeah, so slips, unporting a fuel tank, sure. So you've got a slip as a yaw, so you are going to slosh the fuel a bit.
Yep, that could happen. Let's see here. Let's see here. All my instructors say, don't cross your controls because you will die. Yet cross control is what I do to slip to lose altitude. You're absolutely right. And the other thing, and that gets back to what I said about the ball being in the center. It doesn't matter. Once the airplane stalls, you have to, your ailerons are really not useful. Neutralize them, go with rudder for directional control. And so, and when you do that, you're probably going to be cross control. You're going to have a bunch of rudder input, and it's not going to be coordinated with aileron input at that point.
So I think there's an important point about there's a difference between a forward slip cross control and the base to final, whether that's left or right, skidding cross controlled turn.
Yeah. It's a forward slip or a side slip, they're really kind of the same thing. But in general here, the difference is a curving flight path and a straight flight path. In the straight flight path, I really don't have any yaw going. The airplane is not yawing. And remember what I said about the requirement to actually get an aircraft into a spin. You must have stall and you must have yaw. Those are the two things. If you take either of those things away, the airplane can't spin. That's another advantage of doing that falling leaf maneuver. You can actually see the airplane fully stalled and yet not spinning because you're maintaining directional control with the rudder. When we get it in that turn, we've already set the airplane up. We've got yaw going. The airplane is yawing. We step on the bottom rudder. We're making it yaw even faster. And then we pull back on the stick, and we've commanded the airplane into a snap roll or a spin.
And also that's the wing that's going to drop is already down low.
Yep. Well, it's not so. Don't think in terms of low and high. I mean, this can happen with the airplane like this. This can happen with the airplane like this. This can happen with the airplane like this. It doesn't matter the orientation of the airplane. Remember what I said about attitude doesn't matter? Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's what it's doing with the relative wind and what it's doing with rotation about the yaw axis, So let's see here. To my surprise, the wings come level each time. I took decathlon, install it with controls cross. Surprise, wings come level each time. I discovered what is called the crossover speed. Yes, and it also depends on which way you're turning when you do that. I had an interesting thing. Typically, if you're doing steep turns to the left and you do an accelerated stall, or to the right, the P factor in torque tends to cause the airplane to roll wings level. Well, I did that with, I was out doing that with a guy in a Yak 52. And of course, we did it. And it immediately snap rolled, completely inverted. So we're flying. I said, here, watch this. And oh, we're doing an accelerated stall. And it didn't do at all what I expected. And we ended up inverted. And as we're flying along inverted, he said, did you intend it to do that? I said, no, but that was fun. Let's go do it again. So going out and doing fun stuff, doing this stuff in aerobatic airplanes with a qualified aerobatic pilot, you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot. I've been flying for 54 years now. And my dad was my first instructor when I was 14. I learned to fly in a Cessna 182 back in 1968. And it wasn't until I got an aerobatic airplane in, I think it was 97, and I started doing aerobatics, that a whole bunch of this I started going, oh, now I understand some of those things my dad was telling me way back then that didn't make sense to me then. And so the addition of aerobatics, tail wheel, and formation flying to my set of flying skills have all helped me, I think, become a much better pilot and I hope a better flight instructor as well.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up.
Well, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, I am reachable. Can I pop up my?
Sure.
Sorry, I think that's okay. I had another. Let's see here. I had another window. Let's see. Yeah, let me go back to. I got that, let's see here.
So while you're looking for that, let me.
Well, I'm just trying to get it back on on your screen again.
Okay.
But I seem to have fallen off of. Oh, that's what I did. I seem to have fallen off of.
So let me mention real quick that keep a lookout on your emails. In next month in May, the guest of this program will be Ken Whittakin on again. So as I said, stay tuned to your email for the details around that. And let me see if I can hand control back to you, Brian.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Because I had one more slide, and basically it was contact information for me. Oh well. If anybody would like to get a hold of me, you can reach me at Brian, BRIAN, at Lloyd, LLOYD, .arrow, AERO, Brian at Lloyd.arrow. If you remember my name, stick arrow on the end, and you've got my email address. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to put, oh, can I paste it? I'm sure there's some way to paste it in the question in the chat room. There we go. There's the chat room. There we go. That's my contact. And my phone number is 210-620-0011. There you go. That's my contact info. Feel free to give me a call or send me an email. And I'd love to have you come out and expand your aviation envelope.
All right. Well, on behalf of Jeremy Walters, thank you, Brian. And thank you, everybody, for attending tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It's been great. And I appreciate you guys having me on here. And thank you all for listening and paying attention to an old guy talking about flying.
Talking about airplanes. Nothing wrong with it. All right. Good night.
Good night.